Okay, so we're just about live, and we're live. Hi, everybody. This is Steve Sabludowski, publisher of BodyBuzz.com. And this morning, we're going to be talking Louisiana Legislature with Bernie Pinsonat, pollster, and Jim Brown, a columnist and radio talk show host and a government official for over 28 years. Good morning, guys. How y'all doing?
Good morning.
Yeah, okay, Bernie, good to see you, Steve, up and Adam, and ready to talk about a lot of things going on in the legislature right now.
Such as?
Well, I thought yesterday was an interesting day. You know, the entire focus over the last couple of months has been this fiscal cliff going to fall off the budget, and you didn't hear about other interesting topics and compelling topics in government. I thought yesterday was one of the most interesting days and active days that I've witnessed in the legislature. I was down there last week, Steve. They honored the Constitutional Convention delegates, old guys like me from 1973. I was down there on Wednesday. I was down there on Tuesday for a reunion of former senators that I've had the pleasure of serving in the Senate back in the 1970s. And everyone was just kind of milling around. There was no focus. There was no real teeth in what was going on. A lot of depression, quite frankly, from legislators. But if you pick up morning papers today or look at BayouBuzz.com, you'll see so much going on. Teachers carrying guns that was shut down in a very cantankerous debate. I saw a legislator from Shreveport say that we have to teach our children, not shoot our children. You know, and very electric debate over whether teachers should carry guns. And it wasn't a reasonable debate. It was either yes or no. And it was not a very reasonable debate, a very emotional debate is the point I'm making. Mm-hmm. There was an interesting bill on nursing homes, for example, putting a camera in a nursing home. Right. Had a loved one there. I thought it was a great bill. Representative Helen Marino, who's going to be leading the legislature for the New Orleans City Council in a couple of days. And that passed strongly. And it's a bill that I think is a good bill. Elections on Sundays. You know, I was the chief elections officer for years as Secretary of State. And the highest turnouts in the world for elections are in countries that have Sunday elections. In Switzerland, for example, they get 85, 90% turnout on election day. I think our last election was 13%. So it was an interesting idea. In this, didn't go anywhere, but the idea is you'd go to church if you did that, or take your family and go vote. It can't be any worse than it is in Louisiana, but that piece of legislation was shut down. Interesting also, the jury vote. Well, Louisiana is the only state in the country that requires a 10-2 vote, a split decision. One other state has it only in death penalty cases. We're the only state in America that requires a 10-2 decision, not a unanimous verdict. Right. Where every other state in the federal court system requires a unanimous verdict. So that got a lot of attention. It was very interesting across the board, if you were a legislative watcher, to see all these things going on. One thing I did not see, and then I'll quit talking here and let Bernie give some perspectives, was that in other states across the country, teachers are marching on the legislature. In Oklahoma, up in Kentucky, demanding higher pay. In Louisiana, we have one of the lower paid rates for teachers in the country. There's so much focus on what we can do about improving education, but not a peep out of the teacher groups about pay us more money. I think the average teacher makes about $48,000 a year. National average is $58,000. Southern regionals right at $50,000 a year. So teachers are very quiet in terms of the pay raise, but no controversy there. But a lot of interesting legislation taking place this week if you're a legislative watcher.
Bernie.
Yes.
So why don't you follow up with that? Your observations in terms of what you've been seeing this week. And
I think, Steve,
yeah.
Well, the House is actually quietly moving forward with all of the bills. I mean, they have so many bills, and this is a very short session. You have a budget to deal with, and then you have the controversial issues like guns that are being thrown into the session because of outside events. course, you had a inside event here, the Sterling case a year or so back, and those are sideline shows, which we always have. Guns are all, guns are, Jim's correct, but guns are always in our session. They're always being, we're trying to put them in churches. We've tried to put them in bar rooms. Guns are actually, nobody's going to mess with your gun rights in Louisiana. I think there's a bill to move it to 21 years old. I don't think anyone thinks that'll pass. Guns will end up being status quo, but
that's for long rifles. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to pass. Louisiana is pretty much NRA gun pro. The governor is the same. Most of the legislature's that way, so I don't expect to see that much change. But Jim's right. There is a lot of activity going on related to legislation. We have the normal minimum wage and equal pay legislation that the governor supports, most Democrats, and surprising turn of events. Last week, the Senate killed both those bills, and those were supposed to be gimmies for the governor and his supporters, and they got beat. I think they're trying to bring those back. That's interesting. That will be something that is worth watching to see if there is a discussion about, has the governor lost some of the Senate? Is the Senate becoming more Republican because re-election is right around the corner? The House is already Republican and is not going to get any less.
So there's no blue wave?
No, not at the Capitol.
Uh-huh.
The Senate made a statement, and I think Jeremy Alford wrote about it, and I picked up that you were picking up. You had senators telling you, quite frankly, look, contrary to popular political opinion around the building, that the Senate is not in the pocket of the Republicans, especially aren't in the pocket of the governor. And all of a sudden, two of his major pieces of legislation got beat, which we thought were a gimme coming out of the Senate. Didn't even get out, with it killed on the Senate floor. So it'll be interesting to watch that, because that's a test of is the Senate more independent? I'm not saying that it's going to go totally away from him, but it was probably going to happen because of the elections next year. Most of those guys start running at the end of this session, go back home and start re-election. Most of them are, by the way, comment on the session. Most of them went home, and contrary to some of the stuff you read, very few of them had anyone even talk to them about the session. The Republicans will tell you that they went home and said, "I'm glad you didn't raise any taxes," but there was a lot of controversy at the Capitol. But back home, I moved around the state quite a bit towards the end of that, and it was like nothing happened. People thought that I don't find disgust with the Capitol. I think they just don't buy the argument after 10 years that we continue to have these deficits and we can't do anything to fix them. Yeah, they may be discussed at the overall process, but most legislators, and I'm polling it, they're very popular back home. You're not going to beat most of these people. So that's my general observation, is that the Capitol is a mess. There's no end in sight, probably because of no leadership on anybody's side. But the public is, quite frankly, abandoned caring about it, because after since 2009, by the way, we start off every year with we're broke and we don't have any money, and I don't think the public buys into it. They've just kind of lost interest in the yearly circus at the Capitol, trying to find money to fund the deficit, and it never seems to end. It's like a merry-go-round.
Yeah, if I could pick up on that, Steve, I ran into Governor Edwards last week, and at a reception for the former Constitutional Convention members. And his focus was, I've got to convince legislators about what increases to bring about. He harped on the gas tax a good bit, talked about a number of their options, but there was never any discussion about he talks about this fiscal cliff, but there's just no specifics about it. He's just not very convincing, quite frankly. You and I talked before, Steve, about the fact that, of course, there's areas you can cut. And as Bernie has polled and has eloquently analyzed in his polls, the public out there thinks you can cut a lot more. They don't want more taxes. There's a lot of waste in Baton Rouge. Well, there is some, not as much as the public thinks. But I think the governor made a big mistake from day one by saying, look, I'm going to streamline this operation. We're going to cut here. We're going to cut here. We're going to change this. We're going to consolidate. And now I've done everything I can, but it's still not going to help LSU and the medical situation. But look what I've done to show you. And look, Steve, I was a statewide elected official for 20 years. And if the governor came in and told me to cut my budget by 20%, I would moan and complain about it, but I could do it, and the public wouldn't see one iota of difference. There's layer upon layer of people that could be cut and consolidated, and it wouldn't amount to hundreds of millions of dollars, no. But if it came up with $50 to $100 million, which I think it could, at least the governor could then get around the state and say, boy, I'm fighting to cut this stuff. Look what I found yesterday about the duplication. Look at the overlap. Look at things. I picked up the paper yesterday and saw all the travel expenditures of virtually every board and commission in the state. Why do the architects have to spend $200,000 to go travel? They're supposed to meet once a month in Baton Rouge and get a per diem and decide who gets the architects. The cosmetology board travels all over the country. It's not rocket scientist for a cosmetologist. You sit there and oversee the test, and then you go on back to your job. You don't spend $200,000 and $300,000 for travel. Not a big deal in terms of the amount of money, but the public would pick up on that. Boy, Governor Edwards is trying to cut all this stuff out there, and Steve, he just not made his case. And I told him that, quite frankly, last week, but I'm just not sure it got through. His focus as well, we just got to raise more money. It's going to be bad if we don't. A few things that would show good faith and there could go a long, long way. And he just hasn't done that, quite frankly. So Bernie is right. It gets open ammunition, you see, for legislators to say, well, it's just spend, spend, spend. And if he could show that, say, look, I've done this, 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 and quite frankly, pick some cuts that would go right in the face of some of these legislators. You see, that's what you see what the Chinese are doing to Donald Trump. They're putting the tariffs on states that are Trump states that are going to cost farmers in Louisiana money and other people money. Hit hell where it hurts. And Bernie, you and I could sit down with Governor Edwards in a couple of days, come up with a lot of cuts that would hurt to key legislators. And things probably that could be cut and not really affect public services at all. More privatization, so much to consider at least, and it would show good faith. Hey, the guy's on the right track. He's trying.
Okay, so go ahead. So let me put a tweet up there with me. Let me make sure it goes up, that it is being seen. So I just put up the tweet, of course, Karen Carter Peterson, and as you remember, she said repeal the Second Amendment. Now that has made that's had a lot of people talking for a lot of different reasons. And so I'm just wondering, is there any mileage out of that? I mean, I'm seeing people saying that, at least Republicans saying that, she should resign as a chairperson. What's the impact of that, Bernie? I mean, from just a political standpoint.
Well, it'll be. I think Jim would agree. It'll be something that the Republicans. You'll see it in an ad. It won't be the focus, but it'll be an ad probably aimed at John Bell Edwards. He's a Democrat. She's the head of the party. Other legislators, if you're a white Democrat, especially in sort of middle areas, you'll have to face that. That'll be an ad by one of the PACs running against you. It was not well thought out. They tried to take it back and say it was a retweet, which it was not. But it's something that'll, it's not a big deal today, but you'll see it show up in the campaigns. I don't know how effective it'll be. It's a long ways off, but it's certainly something that has the potential to take a few points off of a candidate, especially a white Democrat, and beat him. It's certainly something that we use against John Bel Edwards, since she's the head of the party and he's a Democrat. So, you don't want those kind of things to start piling up and give the Republicans something like that to beat you over the head with. It's not a big deal today. It doesn't mean anything, but it's out there and it will be used during the election.
So, one second, please. And that is that I've written 2 columns about this, and to me, it's not really clear. It's somewhat ambiguous. She didn't say, we should repeal the Second Amendment, or I think we should repeal the Second Amendment. People put things up all the time that they don't agree with, tweet things or like things. Donald Trump has done quite a lot himself, and then says, oh, well, no, I didn't really mean that, or I didn't know. But I don't think she's handled it right. I mean, she had Stephen Handwerk from the Democratic Democratic Party of Louisiana come out and say, well, she didn't mean it. She hasn't come out with a subsequent tweet.
That's all she meant it.
Well, but she did, however, in response to Lamar White's request.
Right.
She did say, I don't agree with it. It was an interesting topic. I can't believe all the commotion. I'm just paraphrasing. I can't believe all the commotion that's occurring because of a tweet. And I mean, I agree, but I think that if you're going to blame President, and this is what I've said in my columns, if you're going to blame President Trump for stupid things that he's saying on the internet and not thinking it out, you certainly have to blame others, such as Karen Carter Peterson, for likewise putting something out without a qualifier or disclaimer, and also, without following it up, at least at this point in time, and coming out, and it's hurtful. It's not just hurtful to Edwards, it's hurtful to every Louisiana Democrat, just about, and I think it's hurtful too because of her position in a national party. People are tweeting. I mean, I'm seeing people, Don Trump Jr., other people associated with him, and so on, retweeting that the vice chair or whatever she is for the U.S. Democratic Party is in favor of repealing the Second Amendment, even though she hasn't said, "Hey, I'm in favor of repealing the Second Amendment." So I just think it was a mistake initially, and she has aggravated by not coming out. Okay, Jim, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. Well, I was going to say this. First of all, 95% of the people in the state never heard of Karen Carter Peterson or don't know who Lamar White is. Again, a missed opportunity for the governor. I wouldn't have mentioned Karen Carter Peterson and brought the Democrat into it. But based on Bernie's poll, and Bernie, I want you to see if you agree with me on this. If I were Governor Edwards, I'd have called a press conference immediately or made a statement. What a stupid idea. What a dumb idea by the Supreme Court justice. Because even though the Supreme Court has become more conservative, people still don't have a lot of confidence in the Supreme Court. What a dumb idea. People in Louisiana don't want the Second Amendment repealed. The Supreme Court justice needs to rethink what he's doing, and I'll fight him to the teeth. Edwards would have come out great. You said, made it and look, and then replay his military. Look, I served my country. I've dealt with guns. I went to West Point. I paid dues for my country. And I'm going to stand up for my state of Louisiana and take on the Supreme Court if it comes to this. They're not going to repeal the Second Amendment. man, he'd gotten raves and gotten a real plus out of it and kind of pushed Karen Carter Peterson off the radar, if you will, and put the focus on the Supreme Court. And that's how I would have handled it. I think Verdi's polls would have shown that up. But again, he just missed the opportunity. He said nothing, saying, well, I didn't want to ruffle the feathers with the Democratic Party. Don't mention the lady, pop the Supreme Court. It was the right thing to do, I think, and it had been good politics for the governor.
Did she blow it? Did she blow it, Bernie?
Sure.
Did she blow it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, she blew it. She, yeah, look, that's the way she feels. We can talk. The other side is it was a political mistake, but that's the way she really feels, and I'm not going to sit here and say she shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah, I'm talking about politically.
The problem is she's the head of the Democratic Party in Louisiana, but that's the way she actually feels, and it's a conflict. So if you want to be the head of the Louisiana Democratic Party and that's the way you really feel, then then your party has a problem. Here in Louisiana, of course, the governor. So it's a political problem that will come back next year, and you'll see it in a lot of ads. She is the head of the Democratic Party. She basically said we should get rid of the Second Amendment, so they're stuck with it. It's not going to kill everybody, but it will play out in the elections. To what extent, we don't know, but it certainly will be a factor. Big, small, or whatever, but it's not an indifferent comment, not in this state.
Okay, if anybody has a comment or a question, please go ahead and just chime on in. I'm looking at the internet. I'm looking at Facebook and Twitter, and I'm checking to see any comments, any questions. How do you feel about those people out there? How do you feel about this issue? What can she do to correct the situation? Should she come out and say what she personally believes or doesn't believe? So these are just some of the things that would like to hear from you. Would like to get your thoughts. Now tomorrow, Rob Manis and I are going to be talking about this and other issues at 8 o'clock in the morning on Louisiana Legislative Live. Really appreciate it. Certainly will be hearing from you in terms of what you have to say and how you have to feel about this. Okay, so Jim, you have anything further to say about that? I agree with what you're saying, and that is that John Bel Edwards certainly could have jumped on this and made lemonade.
Yeah, well, again, it's missed opportunities to show he's a tough guy, and it builds popular support to put pressure on Republicans and Democrats who aren't supporting him financially. Say, look, guy's a pretty good governor. Yeah, hey, I forgot he'd gone to West Point, and he's very much, for our gun rights, and give the guy a break. It creates a goodwill that moves forward to help him with his agenda. So I think he needs to become more aggressive along that line. No, and finally, Steve, though, I think in the days to come, while you're doing this morning show, it's going to be much more interesting. Like I say, the first week was really dull. I was down there thinking, gosh, these guys and ladies are just kind of passing time. But it looks like things are picking up with some very vital issues that affect an awful lot of people. The issue, for example, shameful that if the parents are a little late paying the lunch fee for their kid going to school, the kid don't get lunch. Taking that out on the child, what a dumb thing to do. And there's a law moving through along that line. So very emotional issues down there that affect an awful lot of people. And we'll have a chance to talk about it in the weeks to come.
So I just put up another tweet. Let me just put this up. Unfortunately, y'all can't see it, but this is from Shannon White. And basically, let me just, it says that Representative Steve Dwight, Republican Lake Charles, said he was torn on the bill because he has children in school and his wife is a teacher. Dwight later voted no on the legislation and the legislation regarding arming Louisiana teachers with handguns. The bill doesn't get far.
Well, 18 states, by the way, have now passed laws allowing under control situations. Maybe it's not the teacher, but someone in the school, and maybe 4 or 5 people in the school to carry guns. You know, the assistant football coach that went over to Iraq, the guidance counselor that's had a lot of weapons training. You get certified, you take various training. There is ways to protect the guns, but in an emergency situation, a few people have access to weapons in a school under very controlled circumstances. That's what I think that Stephen Dwight was kind of torn about. He ended up voting no but he was torn about that. But that discussion wasn't in there. And we've got Representative Barbara Norton up in Shreveport saying that we're going to go around shooting our kids. You know, it got very emotional. And so 18 other states have worked it out. And hopefully this will never happen in Louisiana, but I'm sure I can see why this debate will continue to take place, Steve.
So, Bernie, how important is this gun issue?
Well,
from a political standpoint,
it's important because it's become a political football. You can talk about guns all you want, but we also have another problem, which exacerbates the gun, whatever position you take. We have a lot of sick people, and a lot of those people are showing up in public events with pistols. Look, whether it's a pistol, a gun, or a knife, or running over someone with an automobile, we have people out there who don't value human life, and whatever they choose to kill people with, it doesn't matter. It's that we have those people, and they don't have any value. They place no value on human life, and they're willing to kill people with anything and everything. Guns may be today, but I don't. Maybe the automatic weapons and the big clip magazines make a difference, but probably not, because if there's someone out there who wants to kill someone, we had somebody in London run over people with a car in a crowded street, and we had that in Germany. We have knifings. What are they killing people in London with right now? The crime rate is up. Knives. So as long as there's somebody who's going to kill someone, they're going to find something to kill them with. And you can say the gun exacerbates the problem because it allows it to kill a lot of people in a very short period of time. But they could walk into a school with a Glock 9mm with 3 clips and do the same amount of damage. So, you know, the reality is, what I'm going to do until something changes about the propensity to people to want to take a life without a second thought, is, to me, the scary part of what's happening to the country. And we have more and more of these people, and whatever the weapon is doesn't really matter. They're out there, and we have to do something to stop them, or to put them away so they can't do that thing. And that's the bigger question that really has to be eventually tackled when all the political smoke clears away.
So in terms of political smoke, let me ask you this. Obviously, you had that march a couple of weeks ago. 2 weeks ago or so, and of course, you know, you've had a lot going on nationally after the Florida shooting. Do you believe that it has percolated into Louisiana? I mean, that legislation failed in terms of arming teachers. I'm just wondering whether or not it has had an impact, and also maybe a counter impact, and going forward, of course, it's hard to say, but still, you have a full legislature in a governor's race, etc. And how important is this whole debate going to be?
Well, Louisiana is not. You know, look, New York City, L.A., Chicago, big cities. Most of those people don't hunt fish, by the way. Their guns aren't part of their as growing up, it was something they used. And that's true here in Louisiana, whether you're white or black or whatever. It's part of our heritage. So guns are very important, and taking them away, you're seeing all of this stuff happen in these places. Most of the people in Louisiana is going to look at it as if, you know, what does the guns don't kill people do? That's kind of the background noise you have, and that's the guess you'd say the reason why they're so reluctant to claim a gun is part of our, we're a hunting and fishing state in most of the Deep South. Now, when you go to Atlanta, when you go to Miami, when you go to New York, that's not the culture. So those are big numbers, though. So is it possible that the reign of gunship owners with no limitations are over? I would say we're moving closer to that. I don't know if Louisiana won't be the leader in making that happen, but there are other places that may. You can see there's a strong possibility now you'll see a reduction in some type of restrictions on ownerships, and where it's going, I don't know. But as long as you're going to continue to have these, and it's a political issue, there is a possibility. As long as they're appearing faster than we want them to. Every week or every 2 weeks, somebody's killing people with automatic weapons or pistols or whatever else. So there's a constant pressure on by one side of the anti-gun side to do something about it. So they're being helped by all these.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I said the anti-gun political group is being helped by all of these instances. They continue to happen, and their frequency is also picked up. The media, of course, helps it by the more they publicize it, and there's nothing to do about it. You have to cover it, but it brings more nuts out of the closet to do more crazy things. And whether it's a gun or a knife or an automobile or a sledgehammer, somebody's going to, people want to kill people, they're going to do it.
Jim.
There's a lot of things that we can do that this national debate is focusing on. In the YouTube situation, we keep hearing about say something, see something, say something. And we saw in Parkland where they saw something, they said something, but nothing was done by law enforcement activities. The YouTube shooting that happened this week, the local police, the father of the girl who did the shooting told the local police, look, she's got a real problem with YouTube, and she's got some real mental problems, and laid out a scenario that should have been checked out. So we've got a problem in this country of if you say something and see something, you want something to be done. You want to have something done, and that's not being done in many instances. There's over 50,000 convicted felons who have been arrested for carrying weapons, and they did not go into the database of the FBI. They can go out and buy a gun at a local gun store because they're not in the FBI database. So within the system of checks and balances, Steve, there's a lot of weaknesses. That's not going to solve all the problem, but we can tighten up many of the controls that we're not enforcing right now.
Okay, so let me follow up with that and to say that, everybody seems to say, well, it's a mental health issue. Yet nationally, they're taking away money, for mental health, aren't they? So
yes,
it seems to me like they're doing just the opposite to try to fix the problem. And so we get a manifestation and we have a circular argument.
Steve, back in the Baton Rouge area, Jim evidence it, watched it. There was a group came up 2 years ago with a plan to raise money, to raise taxes for mental health facilities and to be able to take care of more people. And I thought it was very important. I did a poll on it. I helped. Everybody tried to help it, and it just got run over. It was during the presidential. It was on the same ballot as Trump, and it almost passed, but it failed. And so I don't know if it would change today if they did that. They should run with it again, but every community's got to spend as much time and effort as it takes to do something about the lack of help we have available for elected officials, for our health officials, is to get these people off the street and get them some help. Right now, they end up in the worst place you can put them, which is in jail for a few days or so, and they're not treated. And when they're let back out, they're in a worse state. So it is one. look, if you can talk about guns, you have to talk about health care. And it's not going to save all situations, because some of those things are going to be people kill each other because of divorces
Sure.
or domestic. But even then, those people are out there. A wife will leave a husband and he's nutty as a fruitcake, and she's telling the police constantly, this guy's threatening me. And what happens? They can't do anything about him. He eventually goes in, not only kills her, but kills the children. So it's kind of a wake-up call that you can talk about guns all you want, but it would help a lot to be able to take these people off the street and get them some help, and so that they don't hurt other people's and hurt themselves. And that's a big problem that's confronting the entire country. And if we're not willing to spend the money on it, good luck, because it's not just a gun. They're going to find a way to kill someone, however they can.
So doesn't say Governor Edwards have a campaign platform that he can run on, and that is, hey, look, I'm all in favor of guns. I fully support Second Amendment. But gosh, I mean, you've been fighting me all this time about trying to get mental health assistance, and we're going to go nowhere unless we start taking it seriously. Jim?
Yeah, I think you ought to be seeing that right now. I mean, finding issues like that, that the public can galvanize, or his support can galvanize around. We're just not hearing those kinds of things. If the issues are there, and like I say, I think most people think that Edwards is a good guy, and trying to do some things, but where's the vision? Where's the solution-oriented effort out there? And there are some solutions that touch public nerves, as Bernie has so eloquently shown in his polls, but we're just not hearing about that. And that's why we have this stalemate. I think you're right. And particularly because the mental health, in most instances, health issues are dealt with within each state. The feds give you the money and you deal with them on a state level. So it's the right thing to do, and it's good politics, but right now we don't see that impetus coming out of the leadership in Baton Rouge. Okay,
so let me ask you this question from Facebook. Barbara Baudier Berlin, thank you. That's the second time you've asked a question, and I missed it last Friday with Rob, so let me ask the same question. Constitutional Convention for Louisiana. Fiscal House is a mess. Barbara's from the Monroe area, and very conservative, and she's real concerned about our fiscal house. So, Jim, you're a graduate from the Legislative Constitutional Convention. Bernie, you were involved with it way back. Is that a way to fix the fiscal problem that we have? Thank you, Barbara.
Well, when you deal with dollars, I go back to something I've written a column before about on BayouBuzz.com, and you and I discussed before, Steve. 31 years ago, I ran for governor of Louisiana. None of our viewers out there remember that so long back. And one of the planks was we need to take that revenue section of the Constitution, and it needs to be written. When it was written in 1973, Governor Romer, who was a delegate with me at the time, we wrote the section saying no dedications in the Constitution. The idea is if you trust your legislators, then give them the flexibility to meet changing needs. And little by little, we pile more and more into the Constitution, limiting how much money there is to spend. So much is previously dedicated. So I think it's very necessary, at least the revenue section, to go ahead and give some flexibility. If you don't like what your legislator does, then vote him or her out of office. But at least have the flexibility to bring us into the modern times. We're operating under a physical system laid out 50, 60 years ago, and our needs have changed dramatically. So I think we need one at least for the revenue portion of the present Constitution. And I was a delegate that wrote that Constitution, Steve.
To add to Jim, if it's not clear to anybody in politics, Jindal found out after 2008 what it's like to be governor in Louisiana with no money. Starting in 2009, the world caved in on him financially, and he wasn't going to raise taxes because, as we know in the background, he was running for president, although he had the job he liked. So we had to put up with that, but for that lie for 8 years, but that was his decision. Of course, he paid dearly for it. But my point is this: when the governor was elected, the first thing that we all, there were deals cut, and it's by every governor that, oh, we're going to protect the sheriffs, we're going to protect the police juries, we're going to protect them. We got supplemental pay in the state constitution now. And if you look at a neighboring state where all our kids are moving, by the way, they don't operate the way we do. The state government, the governor, the mayor of Houston could care less what the governor thinks because they have their own money, they have their own government, and it doesn't depend on running to Austin to kiss the ring of the governor. We everything has to go through the state, and most people in any poll will say they feel more comfortable with local government because they control it. They votes on individual things they can watch. If there's a tax passed, they get to vote on it. If there's a tax passed in Baton Rouge, they didn't get to vote on it. Some legislators voted on it. So the entire system in Louisiana is outdated because we don't have that money to throw around and to keep people happy anymore. Can't keep the sheriffs and the DAs and everybody else. Plus, when we have a pay raise for one, we have a pay raise for all in the retirement system and everything else. We're overloaded at the top, and we don't have the money to pay for that. And unless you do something to change that, no one in Louisiana, the majority of the people, are going to go ho hum about what's happening in Baton Rouge. And there's no end in sight to it, but the clear picture of why do people want to be governor at the expense of everything else in their life? Bennett Johnson wanted to be governor. John Breaux wanted to be governor. Everybody wants to be governor for only one reason.
I want to be governor.
Yes, and I want to be governor, especially with this system. But it's not the system we should have, and we can't afford it anymore.
Okay, so you're personally in favor of a convention?
I don't know if you have to have a convention or not. You can do a lot of this stuff with legislation. Now, do you have to change parts of the Constitution? Certainly, but you can pass 2/3 of the. You can give the authority back to local governments. Jim mentioned the highway tax and the road tax. We tried to do something with that with Steve Carter, who Jim knows very well, and
my brother-in-law.
Yeah, and it's a good idea in some respects, but of course, if you raise taxes in one parish and the other parish, everybody runs off better buy gas. But the point is, don't tell me we need a statewide gasoline tax because it's not going to do anything for someone in Jeanerette. You can't tell someone in Jeanerette, I want you to pay 17 cents more for a gallon of gas. Your life's going to be better. At Baton Rouge, they don't need roads in Jeanerette. The ones they have are not that bad. They have I-90. You go up into northeast Louisiana, where you're from, Jim, and I don't recognize that place. And there are people who they don't have any money. There is no outlook, no jobs coming their way. The kids are all gone. And you telling me that somebody in any place below Monroe and above it is going to benefit from they can't afford a 17 cents gasoline. It's not going to get them a better job. It's not going to make their lives better. Where we need a better way to be able to come up with ways to raise money. And it shouldn't be at the state level where it hits everybody at the same amount and they don't get the same benefit. Most people don't think they get any benefit.
Okay, so you're saying that you think within the current structure, the legislature could take away powers from the governor, return it locally without a legislative session. Without a constitutional convention.
You can change the Constitution.
But within the
legislature. You can have a constitutional convention. I'm not arguing which. I'm just saying that the system we have is broken.
Okay. But what's the best way to fix it is really, I guess, the question.
Well, do legislators want to give up the the authority to have their DA or their sheriff come by, all the judges come by and beg them for a raise. Why do we do that? Why am I paying money at the state level for stuff in other parishes?
Well, what's the best vehicle? My question is,
look, Jim was a legislator and a statewide elected official, and he's seen it and done it all related to being an elected official, which, you know, he certainly was one of the better ones, because he was always, if you listen to Jim Brown, he didn't just vote on things. He knew what he was talking about, and he always used his intellect to discuss government. That's why he was so successful. So I'm curious what you think about what I just said, but that's the way. I think Louisiana is in trouble because we don't have the money to throw away at the state level, because when we don't have money, being a governor is a miserable experience. We want to be governor because we control everything. When we have the money, we're the most powerful person in any other 50 states. But now it's a miserable job because we're broke.
Okay, so yes and no, you're in favor of a constitutional convention.
I'm undecided on it. I don't know.
Okay, Jim.
I don't.
Yeah. I think at least a limited amount to the revenue section. And I can comment on what Bernie's right. The legislature could do certain things. Let me give you an example. We dedicated highway funds in the Constitution, which we shouldn't have done. All right, when we did it, we left it up to the legislature to set up the nuts and bolts. Well, you know what they did? They're allowing the state police retirement funds to come out of the road funds that are dedicated in the Constitution. That's crazy. So there's a number of ways the legislature could clean up the mess that past legislators have created and come up with a fair amount of money, shifting priorities, quite frankly. I think the legislature could put a firm stand against allowing these local projects to be state funded. You know, we all love the Superdome. They're talking about, I think, another $200 million to fix up the Superdome. No other state in America has financed something like a Superdome for their pro football teams or basketball teams. It's all done on a local level. They put a district together in 4 and 5 parishes. But in Dallas, Texas, probably the finest stadium in the country. Arlington, Texas helped with bombs, but it was financed locally. So we could cut that out and make that be done locally within the legislative mix. I agree with Bernie. I still think we probably need the flexibility under the Constitution to hold a convention or to at least deal with the revenue section. Steve, the legislature in a couple of days could deal with the revenue section, put it as a constitutional amendment on the ballot. You wouldn't have to have a full-blown convention. Number of ways to skin the cat. But right now, until they do that, like Bernie said, until there's more dollars and more accountability, then it's going to be a very frustrating job being governor, and the legislature is going to be really spinning wheels a good bit.
Yeah. I agree with Jim. Look, at the Capitol right now, getting back to what Jim started off with, those bills on emotional issues are front and center right now. What's not front and center is where we're going to get the money. What kind of deficit do we have? How can you pass a budget when you don't know how much money you're going to have? That is there's a fiscal cliff, but it's not money. It's fiscal cliff is when we're going to start making decisions on what we're going to fund with the budget. And until the revenue estimating conference meets next week, and if you want to walk around finding out nothing is going on, ask somebody about the budget. There is no discussion on the budget. There won't be any discussion on the budget till the revenue estimating conference. Then that's the first step, which will get the ball moving, and you'll see people starting to focus on how much money we're going to have for the budget. Well, how much money do we actually need for next year's budget? That's the first thing. That'll give us a glimpse of where the state is. Do we have another surplus? I would think we shouldn't be going backwards. If we are, something's really wrong, because the entire country and actually this state's economy is moving. Then the second thing is we pass a budget, but we don't know how much money we're going to get in the special session. So if you want to look at a big mess, how can you have the special session, which bombed and cratered, was a total disaster? You now go into, it was a gamble that didn't work. you're now trying to pass a budget, but the special session's after, and we don't know how much money they will come up with is a quarter, is a half penny, is it going to be income tax. None of us think if they get a quarter penny, that'll be not the best they can get. But how do you pass a budget when you don't even know how much money you have? And so that's the big issue at the Capitol. But you know what? If you're a citizen of Louisiana and you're watching this stuff, how can you figure this out? So there is a lot of uncertainty, and it contributes to the people don't want to vote, the people don't care, people don't understand. And this is an ongoing nightmare of 9 years in the making. There's no insight to it.
Okay, so somebody's telephone is going off. That means that we need to wrap it up.
Right.
So let's wrap it up now and just say, excuse me. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate your taking your time and opining about the legislative session. We'd love to have you back. Certainly as we go forward. We have over 60 days. So tomorrow we're going to be talking with with Rob Maness, talking about some of the issues that he is fond of. And we'll be putting up some of the video that we're doing right now and transcript. So that's going up on Bayou Buzz. Jim Brown's column is also going up. And thanks, guys. Listen, really appreciate it. Please, those people watching, please share with your friends, your Facebook friends, and others. So, guys, why don't you just hold a second? I'm going to push a couple of buttons. And again, I really thank you. 1 second, please.